One of the great mistakes people make when they talk about success is assuming that it somehow comes down to luck, or to bursts of genius, or to some magical alignment of the stars. And that assumption, while it might give you an excuse, is actually the very thing that keeps most people where they are. The truth is far less glamorous, but far more liberating. Success is the byproduct of consistency, not comfort. It is the slow, sometimes invisible accumulation of disciplined action, repeated so often it becomes part of who you are. And here's the thing, consistency is not something you can fake. You either build it through action, or you remain at the mercy of your fleeting moods. When you wake up in the morning, you have to decide, am I going to live today according to what I feel, or according to what I know must be done? And that's an excruciating decision sometimes, because feelings are loud. Comfort whispers in your ear, telling you that you deserve a break, that you can start tomorrow, that today's effort won't matter anyway. But deep down you know the truth. You know that every time you listen to that voice, you make yourself weaker. You chip away at your own potential. You confirm to yourself that you are someone who negotiates with your responsibilities. Consistency is built when you show up regardless of whether the conditions are perfect, regardless of whether anyone notices, regardless of whether the results come immediately. Think about it. Most people you admire didn't get there by working hard when it was convenient. They got there because they learned to keep promises to themselves when no one else was watching. That's the hard part, isn't it? It's not keeping promises to other people. That's relatively easy because there's social pressure, there's accountability, there's the fear of letting someone down. But the promises you make to yourself, those are the ones that define your character. Those are the ones that reveal whether your word has weight. This is where most people lose the battle. They think motivation will carry them through. Motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes. Some mornings it's there, some mornings it isn't. If your entire strategy for success rests on motivation, you're already at the mercy of randomness. But if you learn to show up purely because you said you would, then you start developing a kind of inner solidity. That's the foundation of consistency, and once that's built, it doesn't matter if you feel tired, stressed, uninspired, or overlooked. You still show up, and over time, those days where you pushed through are the ones that count the most. Now, you might be thinking, why is this so hard? Why is it so unnatural to do the right thing consistently? It's because comfort is an extremely persuasive negotiator. It offers you a reward now at the cost of something later. It whispers you've done enough when you haven't. It feeds on your rationalizations. And the problem is, comfort doesn't tell you what it's really taking from you. It only tells you what it's giving in the moment. A little more rest, a little less pressure, and that feels good now, but in the long run, it's eroding your confidence, your resilience, your ability to endure. I've seen people ruin their own momentum because they believed they could pause their efforts without consequence. But here's the reality. Momentum is fragile. The second you start treating your commitments as optional, you begin dismantling the very structure that was supporting your progress. And then when life inevitably throws a bigger challenge at you, you find yourself unprepared because you've been living at the mercy of your moods instead of building the discipline to handle adversity. The question you have to ask yourself daily is this: who do I want to be in 5 years? Because here's the truth. You're already becoming that person. The habits you keep now are shaping that version of you. You're either training yourself to keep going when it's hard, or you're training yourself to stop when it's hard. And whichever you train will be the one you fall back on when it matters most. And this brings us to something people deeply misunderstand about failure and discomfort. We're taught to avoid them. We're taught to see them as signs we're doing something wrong. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Pain is not an interruption to your journey. It is the journey. Discomfort is not a signal to stop. It's evidence that you're stretching beyond what you've been capable of before. This is where growth lies. When something hurts emotionally, physically, psychologically, It's almost always because it's exposing a weakness. And that's good news because you can only strengthen what you can see. If you fail at something, it's not a verdict on your worth. It's a diagnosis of where you need to improve. The mistake people make is assuming that pain is an enemy to be avoided. But if you look closely, pain is a teacher, one that doesn't lie, doesn't flatter, and doesn't let you hide. Think of your most valuable skills. How many of them did you learn without struggle? Probably none. You learn them by doing them badly at first, by making mistakes, by feeling frustrated, by enduring the embarrassment of incompetence. And you got better not because you were protected from that pain, but because you were willing to experience it and keep going. Pain sharpens you if you let it, but it requires that you stand in it long enough to learn what it's trying to teach you. And this is why people who run from discomfort never find real success. They're trying to skip the class while still wanting the diploma. You can't do that. Life has a way of re-enrolling you in the lessons you avoid, and the longer you resist them, the harder they hit when they come back around. If you avoid responsibility because it's stressful, you'll eventually face the chaos created by your avoidance. If you avoid difficult conversations because they're uncomfortable, you'll eventually face the resentment that grows in their place. Every shortcut you take to avoid pain just leads you to a longer, harder road later. When you embrace pain as part of the process, you stop being shocked when it shows up. You expect it. You even welcome it. Not because you enjoy suffering for its own sake, but because you recognize it as proof that you're in the right place. You're at the edge of your current abilities, and that's where transformation happens. Consistency and pain are linked. You can't have one without the other. Consistency will force you into situations that are uncomfortable. Pain will test whether you can stay consistent through them. And both will demand that you think long term, that you act not for the relief of the moment, but for the benefit of the future. That's what separates people who achieve meaningful success from those who merely talk about it. It's tempting to believe that you'll get to your goals when you finally feel ready, when you've got the right spark, when inspiration strikes like lightning. But that's a trap. It's a lie you tell yourself to justify not acting today. Waiting for motivation is like waiting for the wind to blow in exactly the right direction before you set sail. You might wait your whole life. Motivation is emotional weather. It's fickle, unstable, and beyond your control. Discipline, on the other hand, is the ship. It's the structure that moves you forward regardless of the wind. Discipline is the willingness to act when you don't feel like acting. It's the refusal to negotiate with the part of you that prefers the ease of inaction. That's why it's so rare. Most people think they lack motivation when, in reality, they lack discipline. And that's a much harder pill to swallow because discipline is something you have to build. It's a skill, not a mood. You have to train it like a muscle. Every day you keep a commitment to yourself, that muscle strengthens. Every time you break one, it weakens. You can't outsource discipline. No one can do it for you. You can't hire it. You can't download it. You can't buy it. It's born in the small, unglamorous moments. The decision to wake up when the alarm goes off instead of hitting snooze. The choice to work on the project for another hour instead of scrolling your phone. The refusal to indulge the voice that says, you can skip today. It won't matter. It will matter. It always matters, because every skipped day is a vote for the person you don't want to become. And here's the paradox. Discipline feels restrictive in the moment, but it's the very thing that gives you freedom in the long run. When you master discipline, you control your life instead of being controlled by impulses. Without it, you're like a puppet, hugged around by whatever your emotions demand in the moment. You might think you're free because you can do what you want. But in reality, you're enslaved to whatever feels good right now, and that's the quickest way to destroy your future. Discipline also demands clarity. You can't commit to action if you don't know what you're aiming at. That's why people who drift through life rarely develop discipline. They haven't defined their target clearly enough to warrant consistent effort. If you want discipline, start by deciding who you want to become in exact terms. What does that person do each day? How do they think? How do they treat people? How do they handle setbacks? And then, painfully and persistently, start living like that person now. But here's where most people stumble. They think discipline is about grand gestures. They imagine waking up tomorrow and overhauling their life in one massive burst of effort. That's not how it works. Discipline grows in increments. You prove to yourself that you can keep a small promise, then a slightly bigger one, then another, until your entire life is shaped by this chain of kept commitments. When you break one, you feel it, not out of guilt, but because you've built a self-image that doesn't tolerate betrayal from within. And when discipline becomes part of your identity, something remarkable happens. You stop needing constant motivation to keep going. The action itself becomes automatic, not easy, not effortless, but inevitable. You become someone who does the work, rain or shine, inspired or not. And that's when life starts opening doors for you, because you've proven you can walk through them without hesitation. But discipline doesn't just protect your goals, it protects your time, and that brings us to something even more foundational, the way you view the hours of your life. Time is the one currency you can never earn back. Every second is a transaction, and you're either investing it or wasting it. People talk about money as if it's the most valuable resource, but money can be replenished. Time only moves in one direction, and once it's spent, it's gone forever. Think about how casually people give away their hours, scrolling endlessly, binge, watching shows they don't even care about, saying yes to commitments that drain them, avoiding the hard work that would actually move them forward. They act as if they've got an infinite supply, but they don't. The clock is always ticking, and the question is, what are you buying with that time? Because you are buying something. Every moment is a trade. The only difference is whether you're trading for something that matters or something that won't even cross your mind a week from now. And here's the brutal truth. If you don't take control of your time, someone else will. The world is full of people and systems ready to consume your hours for their own purposes. Advertisers, social media platforms, even well-meaning friends or family. If you don't set boundaries around your time, it will be filled by default with the easiest, most mindless activities, because that's the path of least resistance. And every time you give away an hour to something meaningless, you rob your future self of an hour that could have been used to build something meaningful. People say they don't have time, but that's almost never true. What they really mean is, I'm not prioritizing the things I claim are important. And that's where the link between discipline and time becomes unshakable. Discipline forces you to look at your 24 hours and allocate them deliberately instead of living reactively. It makes you ask, if I only had 1 year to achieve my goal, what would I stop doing today? What would I start doing immediately? That urgency changes everything. Time is also the great equalizer. It doesn't matter where you were born, how wealthy your family was, or what advantages other people seem to have. You get the same 24 hours as everyone else. The difference lies entirely in how you use them. Some people use those hours to learn, to build, to refine, to practice. Others use them to avoid, to distract, to soothe themselves from the discomfort of effort. And after 5 years, the gap between those two people is no longer a gap, it's a canyon. The frightening thing is that you won't feel the damage of wasted time immediately. That's why it's so dangerous. You waste an hour today, nothing catastrophic happens. You waste a week, and you can still recover. But waste years, and you start waking up to the brutal reality that you're living a life you didn't choose, simply because you didn't choose differently when you could have. And that realization, if it comes too late, is one of the heaviest burdens a human being can carry. That's why the grind, the discipline, the deliberate use of your time, they're not about punishment. They're about refusing to leave your life to chance. They're about ensuring that when the clock finally runs out, you can look back and say, I didn't waste it. I didn't throw away what could have been. Because at the end of the day, your life isn't measured in years. It's measured in how you use the hours you were given. and whether you built something worthy of the time it cost you. If you want, I can now expand key points 5 and 6 in the same style so the entire keynote flows as one continuous, powerful narrative. Would you like me to proceed? One of the most dangerous traps you can fall into is to start living as though today exists only for today. That's the mindset that says, I'm just grinding for the weekend, or I'm just trying to make it through this month. When you think that way, you rob yourself of the ability to build something lasting. You begin trading the long term for the short term without even realizing it, and in doing so, you set yourself up for a lifetime of starting over. The truth is that every single day you're alive is a brick. You can either lay it carefully in the construction of something that will stand long after you're gone, or you can toss it aside carelessly, and then wonder years later why there's no structure to your life. You have to develop a vision that extends beyond your immediate comfort, beyond the next paycheck, beyond the next fleeting pleasure. If your vision is too small, your actions will always be small, and small actions might make you feel like you're moving, but they rarely lead anywhere worth going. That's why so many people work hard but still feel stuck. They're expending energy without a clear direction. They're grinding for the sake of movement, not for the sake of building. The human mind needs something to aim at. Without that aim, you drift. And drifting is dangerous because it doesn't feel like destruction at first. It feels like relaxation, like taking it easy. But years of drifting create an erosion of the soul. You look back and realize you've been living the same year over and over, mistaking repetition for progress. That's why your vision must be something worth enduring discomfort for, something big enough to justify the grind it demands. If your vision doesn't scare you at least a little, it's not big enough. A meaningful vision forces you to rise above the impulse to quit when things get inconvenient. It gives your suffering a reason. Pain without purpose is just pain. It corrodes you from the inside. But pain in service of something greater than yourself transforms you. When you can look at the difficulty in front of you and say, this is part of the price for what I want. You stop treating obstacles as personal attacks and start treating them as part of the path. And here's where people often go wrong. They think vision is something you stumble upon one day, fully formed. It's not. Vision is crafted. You chip away at it like a sculptor, removing what doesn't belong, clarifying the shape over time. You get glimpses of it in your successes and your failures. You refine it by trying, by failing, by recalibrating. That's why the grind is essential. It gives you the raw material to work with. You can't refine a vision you never put into motion. Your vision also has to be bigger than your own survival. If all you're grinding for is to pay the bills and keep the lights on, you'll burn out quickly, because that's not a vision. That's damage control. Real vision has an element of legacy to it. It asks, what will I leave behind? Who will benefit from the work I'm doing now? How will my existence improve the lives of others? And when you answer those questions honestly, you give your grind a moral weight. You're no longer working just for yourself. You're working for the future you want to hand off to the world. That's fuel. That's what keeps you moving when comfort starts whispering in your ear. But no matter how grand your vision is, none of it matters if you refuse to take ownership of your life. This is the step that most people quietly avoid because it's heavy. It's much easier to look at your circumstances and say, I would be further ahead if it weren't for them. Them could be your parents, your boss, the government, the economy, bad luck, or whatever villain you choose. That mindset is seductive because it lifts the weight of responsibility off your shoulders. It gives you a reason to stop trying, but it also locks you in place. The moment you hand over responsibility for your life to someone or something else, you give up your ability to change it. Ownership is the most liberating and terrifying principle you can live by. It means that everything in your life, whether you caused it directly or not, is now your responsibility to deal with. You might not be at fault for where you started, but you are responsible for where you go from here. That's a hard truth because it strips away the comfort of excuses. It forces you to confront your own role in your situation, which means you have to change yourself instead of waiting for the world to change for you. And that's uncomfortable, because real ownership demands that you look at your habits, your decisions, your environment, and your associations with brutal honesty. It's far easier to focus on what's unfair than it is to admit that you've been wasting time, making poor choices, or avoiding challenges. But here's the irony. Until you take that uncomfortable step, you remain stuck in the very circumstances you're trying to escape. Taking ownership doesn't mean you have to do everything alone. It means you stop waiting for rescue. You can seek help, you can learn from others, you can use the resources available to you, but you do it from a place of agency, not dependency. That difference is critical. One mindset says, I can't move until someone fixes this for me. The other says, I will find a way forward no matter what. And when you adopt the latter, you stop seeing yourself as a victim of life and start seeing yourself as the author of it. When you fully embrace ownership, something shifts. You begin to respect your own time more because you see it as the raw material of your life. You begin to guard your commitments more fiercely because you understand that every promise you keep shapes your identity. And you stop entertaining the fantasy that someone else's effort will create your success. You realize that your vision will only be built if you build it, and your future will only change if you change it. Ownership also forces you to raise your standards. You stop accepting mediocrity from yourself. You stop tolerating the habits and behaviors that keep you small. You stop living reactively, and you start engineering your life intentionally. That doesn't mean you'll control every outcome. Life is too chaotic for that. But it does mean you'll control your input. You'll show up, you'll work, you'll learn, and you'll adjust, no matter how unpredictable things get. And the deeper you commit to this mindset, the more you realize that the grind is not punishment. It's proof that you've accepted the role of the one who builds, the one who shapes, the one who refuses to hand over the pen and let someone else write the story of your life. You've stepped into the position of responsibility, and with that comes the weight of the world, but also the authority to change it.